here is some poison in the well. Atheists are terrible at math or logic, or possibly both. Let me tell you what I mean. Proof is relative. Evidence is relative. Now, actual proof and actual evidence are not relative, but the threshold upon which a person will accept truth and evidence is very relative. I want you to think with me for a second. What if a man walked up to you and he said, I want to enter into a bet with you. I want to enter into a wager with you. I want to bet my entire future earnings, and I make a pretty good living, against your entire future earnings. So no matter what I make from this point forward, I will give it to you versus what you will make and you give it to me. And it's going to be over dice rolls. I can roll threes, as many as you would like. And I will let you set the time, the place, the location. I will let you bring as many witnesses as you want. I want you to bring television stations. I want you to make sure this is live and on air and recorded. You can even pick out the dice. How many rolls in a row would it take for you to enter that bet? I am pretty sure that you wouldn't do it for one dice roll. I mean, you're betting your whole earnings for the rest of your life over a 15% chance. That's probably not wise. Would you do it for 7 rolls? Would you do it for 10 rolls or 40? What we do know is that humans would enter into this bet at different thresholds. The outcomes are the same, but the thresholds are different. And if this man could continually roll threes, at some point, it would be proof to some that he is always going to be able to roll threes, and it might take a few more rolls for others, but the threshold of evidence would be different between the individuals. To further this illustration, what if the day you get there, you come up with you want to be, kind of snide and kind of throw this at the person. You're like, oh, so you think you can roll threes all day long? And yeah, I'm going to enter in this airtight contract with you over my entire wages the rest of my life versus the entire wages the rest of your life. And so I've come upon an amount. How many times? You've got to do it 777 times to do so. Now, if this man began and rolled the dice and landed on a 3 the first time, you'd probably be like, that's okay. That's inconsequential, but, I got a lot more to go. And then he does 2 more in a row after that. You'd be like, okay, this is interesting. At this point, this is now interesting. What's going on here? And then if he rolled 100 in a row, you might begin to fear and you might begin to think, has this guy swapped out the dice? And you might begin to run around then and begin to complain that maybe this guy is cheating, like what's going on? And he sees the concern in your eyes, and so he comes over and he says, hey, do you have some other dice that you'd rather do this with? And you're like, sure. And he's like, well, and I think you're having some trouble here, so I need to explain something to you, that I am God and I'm rolling these dice and they're always going to be 3s. You probably would not believe that yet, but what if he said at that point, he's like, listen, does it take more to convince you? Okay, so change the terms. And you're like, well, okay, now it's got to be 7,777 times. And he goes, I agree to that. And so he walks over and he begins to throw more and more and more dice, and it's always on 3, always on 3, always on 3. At what point, literally, would you be in a state of confusion? At what point would you be in a state of disbelief? At what point would you be like, this isn't happening? Like, am I in a dream? Has my reality changed? Has everything I've known about math, have I actually been asleep my entire life and now I'm waking up and seeing reality for what it actually is? Is that what is happening? You see, the proof in the pudding would have been for plenty before that. If he got 100 times in a row, they're like, yeah, this guy's definitely God. But at what point would you might like, I want to change the terms, because now you realize you have lost everything, and you're like, oh man, he's going to take it all from me. And so now you want to weight the dice, and you're like, hey, I was wrong. Let's try this dice over here. And so you bring him a different dice, and it's weighted to your advantage, and somehow, miraculously or another, he continues to roll threes. You see, this is exactly what the Bible is to atheists. The Bible is always literally coming true with its prophecies, and they cannot stand it. It creates so much disbelief in them, and it's not because it's not true and actual and real, it's because their threshold is different and constantly changing. They don't want it to be true. They want to back off of it being true. So you do understand that prophecy in the Bible is a very small portion of the Bible. You've got the laws of the Bible, you've got the morality that talks about, you've got long stories in the scripture talking about King David and the life of Abraham, and you've got all these songs in the Bible, and you have church history, and then you have how the church should act, and you've got all this focus on everything else except for prophecy. But there is a pretty decent section of prophecy in the book, and for somehow or another, it continues to roll threes. Well, the atheist absolutely wants to change the terms and conditions because this doesn't seem right. Their threshold, they want the threshold to be different. And so they try to control the circumstances of the prophecy. And here are the nonsensical things that they state. Like the Bible isn't really true because it was actually written after the fact, and it was stated in such a way to look like it was before the fact. That argument might work if we didn't have historical data and sources of other things. But it might work if you look way back at the beginning and you had a really fuzzy history and you didn't know all the truth of history. But what do you do about the Bible that was written before you were born, that's totally complete, that's been all throughout the world, and now things are still coming true in it? What do you do about that? It's rolling threes. Well, what about those that say, well, actually the Bible is a myth, it was created by man, and they just wrote a whole bunch of stuff, and after you write so much stuff, you're eventually going to get something right. But logically, if we think about that, if you make up a whole bunch of crap, how much is going to be wrong? It should be easy to just go through the Bible like, that is a wrong prophecy, wrong prophecy, wrong prophecy, wrong prophecy, wrong prophecy, and there should be way, way more of those than the prophecies that are occasionally right. Well, it's just so metaphorical that sometimes it's right. Well, that goes back to the same thing about writing so much information. If it's metaphorically right sometimes, then it should be metaphorically wrong most of the time, but that is not the way the prophecies turn out. And one of the last little attempts to control it is, well, it's not really a prophecy because it doesn't have a timeline. Is your doctor wrong if he tells you you've got to change your eating habits? You're a diabetic, you're crashing your system, you continue to indulge sugar, and because of that I can see circulation issues, and you're going to lose your feet. They're in very bad shape. Is the doctor wrong because you lost your feet in December of 2025 instead of January 26? It doesn't even matter at that point. The doctor is right because you are losing your feet, and he proclaimed it ahead of time. So what we know from prophecy is that the Bible is true and that God is real, and that some still subjectively deny it because of their threshold of what they will actually consider as evidence, not because the evidence isn't clear and abundant.